Hello, this is Dr. Richard Olivas, and this is the lecture titled The Progressive Movement, 1900 to 1914. The main idea that we are trying to convey in this very interesting and informative lecture is this, and it's the thesis statement on the top of the screen. During the progressive era, many Americans tried to reform a society that they thought had been adversely or wrongly affected by industrialization, urbanization, and immigration. So this is a period where many American reformers want to fix what they think has gone wrong in the prior century. The effects of industrialization or the rise of a factory system. The condition of laborers and workers in particular inside those factories, working very long hours at a very, very low wages. Industrialization was a serious problem in the minds of the reformers, that had taken away skilled crafts from many workers, making shoes in a factory, for example, instead of making shoes by hand. And every commodity underwent the same process, where craftspeople no longer made them, but now they were made in factories. Another problem, of course, was urbanization, the crowding of people into cities, the lack of housing, the unsanitary conditions. Many of those buildings at this time did not even have plumbing or running water or toilet systems. So urbanization and the growth of large cities and diseases and overcrowding is a serious problem that the reformers tried to address. And then another big problem was immigration, because the factories that were set up, that sprang up all across the country, needed many workers. And many times they relied on the immigrant labor force who, in the beginning at least, perhaps would accept lower wages in order to sort of get started in the United States. So, but the reformers were united around the idea that something seriously wrong had taken place. The country was in a worse condition because of industrialization, urbanization, and immigration. So let's talk a bit about the progressives, these reformers, people that thought they had figured out the keys to progress in a modern industrialized world. First of all, who were the progressives? Historians often talk about a progressive movement, but actually there are a number of movements, or there were a number of movements, some of them contradictory, but all of them focusing on problems created by a rapidly expanding urban and industrial world. Their particular goals also were different. Sometimes they were the same, but many times they were not. So generally they wanted to fix problems, but how they would fix problems, that's another question. That's the particular goals or aims. Some reformers, many of whom were from the middle class, sought to humanize the city. They wanted to improve housing and schools and to provide a better life for the poor and for recent immigrants. Some of them were concerned about the conditions of work inside factories and mines and in agriculture, and they were concerned about the rights of labor. Other reformers tried to bring about change in the political system, which would make the political system more responsive to the interests of not only the progressives, but the people that they hope to represent. But despite the different methods or different goals that progressives might have had, it seems that the reform movement or the progressive movement sprang from common roots, or they were inspired by common or similar ideals. Progressivism had its roots in the 1890s when a lot of reformers were shocked by the devastation caused by the depression, the economic depression of 1893. And they were influenced by reading books like Henry George's Progress and Poverty, which argues that the cause of poverty is progress. That progress is what causes poverty. This was in itself a shocking revelation. And they were also influenced by having read Edward Bellamy's Looking Backward, 1888. Many of them were influenced also by the social gospel movement, which sought to build the kingdom of God on earth by eliminating poverty and promoting equality. Point B, how did progressives see the world? What was their worldview? How did they look at the world around them to come to the conclusion that they did? And if we sort of understand their worldview, we can understand how they saw things. First of all, progressives were influenced by the Darwinian revolution and by the theories of Charles Darwin. And they believed that the world was in flux, that it was constantly changing. And so they tended to rebel against what was fixed and formal in every field of endeavor, whether it be history or mathematics or the way society was viewed. They believed in change, and that change was not only inevitable, but it should be promoted, change for the better. They also believed that ideas could bring about important changes or necessary changes. One of the philosophers of the progressive movement was a man named John Dewey, D-E-W-E-Y. And Dewey wrote that ideas could become instruments for change. The philosopher William James, who believed in what we call pragmatism, denied that there were universal truths. He said an idea should be judged by its usefulness. Sometimes today you hear the phrase, if it works, work it. James was a pragmatist. He believed in trying what worked, throwing out what didn't work, and then looking for new ideas that work in order to bring about change. A third very important idea that most progressives shared was that nurture excelled nature. Most of the progressives were what we call environmentalists, not in the sense of saving the environment today, but they were convinced that the environment, that the world in which somebody was born into and raised was much more important than heredity in forming someone's character. The older idea that the progressives rejected was that people come into the world in a predetermined sort of way, that they came in, all their character traits were in them as children, just waiting to sort of come out or be developed. They didn't believe that. They believed that heredity, people weren't born better than somebody else. People weren't born worse than somebody else. Everybody was born alike. But what made the difference was the kind of world that you were born into and how that world you were born into affected you. So they believed in creating a better world so that you could develop better people, because the world around us is more important than what we brought into the world. So, for example, if you can build better houses and better schools, then you can make better people and a better society. That's the idea. So they don't believe that people come into the world better or worse. They believe that people come in the same, but some people have more opportunities than others. And some people have better, they're born into a better condition. The world around them is better. A fourth idea, unfortunately, is that many of the progressives, not all, certainly not African-American progressives, but most white progressives focused on economic change, political change, a change in the factory system, but they continue to think in racially discriminatory ways. Even the most, many, not all, but many of the most advanced reformers thought in very stereotypical or even racist categories. That is, they sometimes even believed that certain ethnic groups could be molded and changed more easily than others. So that some people actually were better than others. So this is, of course, an unfortunate strain in the thinking of some of the progressives, or actually in many of them. Other attributes or characteristics of the reformers, and I should just say that progressivism in many cases, perhaps in most cases, did not usually mean progress for Blacks or American Indians or other groups. The progressives also shared other characteristics or attributes. One of them was a desire to impose order and efficiency on a confused, disorderly world. In many ways, progressivism was the first modern reform movements. There had been reform movements in the 19th century. In the 1830s, there were anti-slavery groups. There were groups dedicated to temperance, or getting people to drink less alcohol, things like that. But in the 20th century, from 1901 forward, progressivism was probably the first modern reform movement. It tried to bring order and efficiency to a world that had undergone major transformations by rapid growth and technology. So there was a lot of change, so much change that sometimes it seemed chaotic. So they tried to impose order on this if they could. Another attribute that many of the progressives shared was the longing for nostalgia. That is, the progressive movement was infected, if you will, by, or influenced by, nostalgia, because they wanted to go back to a lost world, to a world that had existed but had disappeared. They wanted to, if they could, to go back to a pre-industrial age where you could bring back the handicraft industries, making things by hand instead of making them by factories. Many of them were small utopias, tried to become self-sufficient groups by making everything by hand. And also, many of them tried to promote small town and farm values in the cities. So they tried to go back to an older, more traditional way of thinking. And of course, people in the 1900s to 1920s, they didn't, especially younger people, they didn't necessarily think like that. So they longed for, they always said there was a good old days. They wanted to go back to them. When in fact, those good old days really, in many cases, weren't that good. It's sort of like sometimes you hear people today, they would say, well, I remember when you can go out and you didn't have to lock your doors. But as if to say today it's crime ridden, and that never existed before. But that's the idea. We call that nostalgia, looking for a romanticized past when the world was much better. It was certainly different. Whether it was better, that's another question. Another attribute of the progressives was that most of them tended to be from the middle class. That is, many of them were not in the working class. They didn't work for an hourly wage. Sometimes they had, for the most part, they had salaries and were professional doctors and lawyers, and things like this, teachers. And sometimes they tried to teach their middle-class values to the poor, to the recent immigrants, when those people didn't really necessarily share those values. Sometimes it wasn't forced, but it sometimes was, it looked coercive. It looked like they were trying to force values on people. Sometimes the progressives perhaps seemed more like they were interested in controlling people than in reforming society. And sometimes they can be paternalistic. That is, they sort of look down their nose at the poor and others. One of their great strengths, of course, is point number 4. They were very statistically minded, and they were realistic about many social problems. That was the generation of that time. They relied on statistics, on numbers, on surveys, on numerical facts. They went around, and many of these records still survive and contain a lot of useful information. They would go into crowded apartment buildings and survey. They would measure how large the apartments were. They would ask how many people lived inside them in much more detail than even people that were census gatherers. And they knew their ages and their schools and so on and so forth. They issued reports about every kind of problem, and they believed that those reports, you know, they held them up with like a book. They believed those reports, which were based on statistics and facts, would lead to change if people accepted what they said. They wanted to document everything and record everything. And that's why you see so many photographers recording things, like Lewis Hine, even city paintings by John Sloan and others. And then novels were sometimes, like Theodore Dreiser and people like that, they wrote very realistic novels of city life with gritty detail that had never really been talked about before. Point number 5, one very important characteristic or attribute of the progressives, but they were very optimistic. That is, they believed that human nature, at least for most people, they believed that human nature was malleable, that it was changeable. People could change. Because people could change, they believed that society could change. And, you know, when we look back at them now, sometimes they seem not very well informed. They seem maybe a little naive, or maybe not very streetwise or realistic, but they did have a sense of urgency about them as they tried to fix social problems. And also, very importantly, they asked good questions. They asked questions that in some cases nobody else was asking. They, for instance, in a world that was now dominated by very large, powerful corporations, by large cities, by these growing transportation systems, they asked questions like, how much responsibility does the government have to regulate these corporations and cities, to control what goes on inside them? They asked, how much responsibility does society have to care for the poor and the needy? We live in a world today where people just assume that the government has this responsibility, but people didn't always believe this. A century ago, people didn't believe that government had the primary responsibility to relieve human misery. They believed that private charities and private individuals did, and that we will see changes in the administration of Franklin Roosevelt after the Great Depression and what's called the New Deal. The progressives really didn't agree on answers, but they were asking tough questions, and that sometimes where change starts. This is a painting called Dust Storm, Fifth Avenue. You can see in the background there the iconic buildings of the time. And you can see how cities can be beautiful, but they can also be filled with difficulty too. And that district behind you now, that building behind you is called the Flatiron, and that is sometimes called the Flatiron District today. And it's a very beautiful area, and it's of course had many years to progress. These are some children in a home where they are being taken care of. Many of them are young immigrant children. Of course, many of them are not. It's sort of a mix. We'll see that some of the reformers specialize in trying to take care of the young people of that time. The muckrakers. The muckrakers are very important because they were able to bring to the attention of the general public serious problems in society. And they sort of uncovered problems and then tried to sort of expose them in what we call the expose. And they tried to shock readers by photographs and images and descriptions to help galvanize change. One group of writers who exposed corruptions and other wrongdoings in American society were called the muckrakers. And that term was invented by President Theodore Roosevelt. And the muck is what the dirt looks like where a lot of farm animals have been. And so when you are a farmer, you have to go out and rake the dirt rakers or muck rakers. And of course, there's a lot of waste and things that are not very nice in the dirt. And so Theodore Roosevelt sort of sarcastically described them as muckrakers, people that go through the garbage and try to find out what's going wrong and expose people and embarrass people. He himself was the object of many muckraking exposés. Not all of the muckrakers were reformers. Some were, but some just wanted to profit from scandals, sort of like the scandal magazines you see at the grocery store or perhaps that you see online. But reformers did learn from the techniques of the expose, how to make the public aware of social problems. The muckrakers had their roots in the new magazines of the 1890s, what we call the journalistic revolution. In the 1890s, there were already magazines in existence, like the Atlantic, like Century, Scribner's. These magazines had very small, highly educated audiences. That is, they very few subscribers. But then came in the 1890s a lot of the new magazines called American, McClure's, Cosmopolitan. They, according to one writer, they had slick formats, carried a lot more advertising, and sold very widely. Some of them in 1910 had paid circulations of over 500,000 subscribers. That's a very large subscriber base even today. And so these magazines were competing for readers, and the editors wanted to publish articles written by investigative reporters who wanted to tell their public what was wrong in American society. So they published these scandal pieces. And some of them, of course, were serious works of investigative journalism. In point C, we see Lincoln Steffens and Ida Tarbell. These are two very important muckrakers of the time. Lincoln Steffens, of course, was from California, and he wrote articles for McClure. He exposed connections between corrupt politicians and otherwise respectable urban business people. In 1904, Steffens wrote The Shame of the Cities, and that book became sort of a rallying cry to clean up corruption and graft in city government. Ida Tarbell was even more influential. Ida Tarbell was a teacher who had become a journalist. She had, I believe she grew up in Western Pennsylvania, not far from the first oil well in the United States. She published a number of successful books before turning her attention to the Standard Oil Company and John D. Rockefeller. And that outraged expose, based on years of research and hard evidence, showed that John D. Rockefeller was ruthless and unfair and monopolistic in his business practices. And there were other muckrakers, too numerous to mention. There was Ray Baker, who exposed corruption in the powerful railroads. David Graham Phillips revealed with facts and evidence the close alliance between politics and business in a book called The Treason of the Senate, 1906. And then there were novels like Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, 1906, that described the horrors of the Chicago meatpacking industry and the condition of immigrant workers in those factories. And then in 1901, Frank Norris wrote The Octopus, which dramatized, in words of one, the railroad stranglehold on farmers and the control of farm prices. So this is a diverse group of people exposing serious corruption and serious problems in major American industries. Here's a picture of Theodore Roosevelt, American president, who invented the term muckrakers. This is the Atlantic Monthly, which was a famous 19th century magazine with a very small, limited audience. But here's Cosmopolitan, one of the new magazines. You can see it's flashier, it's more attractive in its colors and its layout. And in this magazine, a lot of muckrakers published important works. Here's another group of reformers, which we won't have time to go over each and every picture, but here's that was Lincoln Steffens, his book, The Shame of the Cities. And as we said, this sort of began what's called an anti-graft movement to clean up corruption in city government, because there were very strong connections between corrupt politicians taking bribes and urban business people. Lincoln Steffens. This is Ida Tarbell, the great writer and one woman who exposed John D. Rockefeller. Here's, you can see her book against Rockefeller started in McClure's magazine, one of the new magazines on the scene for a much more popular audience. And you can see it has short stories and literature, but then it says The Story of Rockefeller, opening of the second part of the history of Standard Oil by Ida Tarbell. So these are very important magazines because of the subject matter that's being treated within them. And then, of course, this becomes the book, The History of the Standard Oil Company. illustrated with portraits, pictures, and diagrams. Very important. Here's Upton Sinclair, who wrote The Jungle. Here is a movie poster to the cinema version of The Jungle. And you can see there the Upton Sinclair credit at the top. Wonderful story of the beef packing industry. 210 astounding scenes, 5 daring acts. And here is a picture from the 1960s where Upton Sinclair, in a very advanced age, comes to the White House, and he's greeted by President Lyndon Baines Johnson. This is a picture of Tammany Hall in New York City, which we'll talk a little bit more about later, but this is where a lot of politics took place. And this is where a lot of connections between politicians and corrupt business people were transacted. Here's the head of Tammany Hall. Tammany Tiger Loose, taking down poor people. And Tammany Hall, of course, represents the New York political machine. There's Tammany Hall, showing how powerful the reach of big money is into business. And you can see the Tammany's, who's shining his Tammany's shoes. You can see it's the mayor of the city and people who are involved in city government doing the favors for big business. Point 3, working children. Nothing disturbed social justice progressives more than the sight of children, sometimes as young as 8 or 9, working very long hours in dark, dangerous factories. Now, it's a fact that children had always worked in factories. Children still work in factories, and children still work in farm fields. So that, in that sense, hasn't changed. Young people have worked in factories since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, but it was a practice that still offended the progressives. Jane Addams, who devoted her life to creating settlement houses in large American cities and taking care of immigrant mothers and their children, said this, quote, "Children are put into industry very much like we put in raw material. And the product we look for is not better men and women, but better manufactured goods." Florence Kelley, as the readings point out, was one of the most important leaders in the crusade against child labor. Kelley had grown up in an upper class Philadelphia family, had graduated from Cornell University in upstate New York. And like Jane Addams of the settlement movement, Florence Kelley was part of that first group or the first generation of college-educated women. Now, when the University of Pennsylvania refused admission to Florence Kelley as a graduate student because she was a woman, she went to the University of Zurich in Switzerland. There she got married and became a socialist. The marriage failed, and some years later, Florence Kelley moved to Chicago with her children, lived in a Hull house that was set up by Jane Addams, and then she sort of found a cause that meant a great deal to her, and she poured her considerable energies into the cause or the campaign against child labor. One friend described Florence Kelley as, quote, explosive, hot-tempered, determined, a smoking volcano that at any moment would burst into flames. When Florence Kelley could not find an attorney in Chicago to argue child labor cases against some prominent corporations, she decided to go to law school, pass the bar exam, and argued the cases herself as an attorney. Now, Florence Kelley and other child labor activists or reformers, they were able to win a few cases, but they quickly realized or recognized that there needed to be state laws if they were going to have any influence, that states themselves, like the state of Illinois, where Chicago is located, that Illinois would have to outlaw child labor. So that way you could have more of an influence against companies that were abusing children. Many businesses, of course, made very large profits by hiring children. And a lot of legislators and government officials may be remembering how they grew up as a child delivering newspapers or working on the farm. They said it was good for a child's character to work hard and take responsibility. And it is good for young people to work, but not to work full time or 70-hour weeks and not be able to go to school because of it. So reformers then took time and effort to gather statistics, to get evidence about the effects of children working long hours in these dark, dangerous factories. And then they put pressure on the Illinois state legislature to pass an anti-child labor law. However, that very law was struck down several years later by the Illinois Supreme Court that declared the law unconstitutional. So since states were passing laws, but then courts were invalidating them, many reformers set their heights even higher. Rather than try to work at the city level or even the state level, they believed that the real impact against child labor would take place if they could get national laws made by the US Congress, signed by the president, to outlaw child labor in all the states, not just one state. And so there is a movement for what we call national child protection laws. And an important individual in this national fight was named Edgar Gardner Murphy. Edgar G. Murphy. He was a preacher or a pastor from Alabama. And it was his idea to form the National Child Labor Committee. And Gardner Murphy was a social gospel minister. He believed that it was the responsibility of the Christian church to reform society as well as save souls. He was shocked by the number of children working in southern textile mills, and where they had serious injuries, where they worked full-time and could not go to school. And this angered him into passing laws. The National Child Labor Committee, the NCLC, opened a headquarters in New York City. And then it drafted or wrote a model state child labor law. And then that model law could be taken by any state, and just let's say the state of Illinois wants to borrow that language. You can take the language that the committee drafted and just put Illinois in there for the name of the state, and so on and so forth. And then they could take that. In other words, these were like, you could sort of cut and paste a law and then introduce it, right? And he tried to coordinate, and the Child Labor Committee tried to coordinate the anti-child labor movement around the country. Between 1905 and 1907, 2/3 of the states in the Union, and 2 out of every 3 states in the United States, passed some form of a child labor law. Unfortunately, many of them had loopholes that exempted a large number of children, especially if you were a young person delivering newspapers or working in a movie theater, something like that. The committee also supported a national bill in Congress to prevent the employment of children in factories and mines. That bill, of course, did not pass. The child labor reformers did convince Congress in 1912 to establish a children's division or a children's bureau in the Department of Labor. However, what really in the end forced children out of factories and got children from laboring were what we call compulsory school attendance laws, meaning that the law became that students, young people, had to go to school. And if they didn't go to school, it was against the law. That got kids out of the factories and out of the mines and out of the dangerous, dark work locations. Because child labor laws were difficult to pass, in some cases even more difficult to enforce. But what we see here taking place is a pattern or a model for the reformers to follow. That is, the crusade against child labor was very typical. It began when middle-class reformers were angry and outraged and indignant against what they saw. So it starts with moral outrage. And then reformers move past their anger and start gathering statistics and evidence, taking photographs to show children being abused. And then they push for legislation, first on the local level, then at the state level, and eventually in Washington, D.C., at the national level. But just because a law is passed doesn't mean that that's the end of the fight, because like a lot of reform efforts, the child labor battle was only partially successful. There was so much profitability in child labor that businesses continued to do it. A lot of politicians and judges did not want to regulate the work of children because it seemed like a personal matter at the time. Some parents who were very poor, in some cases might have been desperate for money and would have encouraged their children not to go to school and to work. They broke the law so their children could work and bring money home for the family. So it's there's a lot of difficulty in being a reformer. This is Jane Addams, of course, from the Settlement House movement. These are some photographs taken by different reformers of a newsboy, and I think they're delivering newspapers. They're not delivering newspapers for an hour before they go to school. They're selling newspapers on the corner all day, in some cases in very cold weather. These are some children, child laborers with their lunch pails, getting ready to go to work. There's a young girl in a southern textile mill. And if she works full-time in that mill, she's not going to get an education. But it was very profitable to use child labor. You really had to pay them almost nothing. You can see also she has to wear her hair sort of behind her in a I don't know what you call it, not a bun, but like a ponytail, just to pull her hair back, because those machines are moving very fast back and forth. And if a worker doesn't have his or her hair pulled back, then the hair can get caught and the child can get pulled into the machinery. These are some young boys that are miners who go down in many cases to mines that are very dangerous. In some cases, a half a mile below the surface of the earth. Most of these kids never got even a rudimentary education. If you look closely, some of those young people appear to have already lost an eye or have visual problems or lung problems. This is a diagram of two young boys on a trolley in a very small, some of those mine shafts were so small that full-grown adults who were heavier couldn't get in there. So you had to have children because they're small and can get into these tight locations down there for 12 hours a day. And there are cave-ins, and it's a lot of young children, even if they survived, had significant health problems. These are some young children that are working to process food in a cannery, probably. Boys and girls. And a couple of elderly people probably watching the crew. Reform and juvenile crime. Reformers also worried, let's go back to that first, let's go back here just to pick up point E. The reformers also worried about young people who got in trouble with the law. Sometimes the young children were doing in the city what they had done on the farm, because a lot of farmers in this period closed their farms, moved into the city, became factory workers, and their kids went with them. You know, and in the country, you can pull certain pranks, but you can't do that in the city. And so the reformers were afraid of young people being put on trial in an adult court and then thrown into jail with hardened criminals. Almost at the same time in Chicago and Denver, reformers began to organize what we now call juvenile courts, where judges had the authority to put delinquent youth on probation. In some cases, unfortunately, take them from their families, make them wards of the state, or you put them in an institution, which sometimes was even worse. But the juvenile court, it was believed, often helped prevent young delinquents from adopting a life of crime. The problem, however, was that young juvenile offenders did not have all the rights that adults had in a court, and they did not have what we call due process rights. And it wasn't until 1967 that the US Supreme Court recognized finally that children were entitled to procedural rights when accused of a crime. But that was, of course, many years later. There was Reverend Murphy, who founded the National Child Labor Committee. The National Child Labor Committee, why? 2 million child workers under 16 years today. We want them to be normal men and women. You want this too. Join the National Child Labor Committee. Now, of course, they would have this all over the internet, but back then they would print these out, pass them out in front of factories, perhaps, or pass them out on the street, print them in newspapers and so on. This is the picture of Judge Ben Lindsey, who was the founder of the juvenile court system in the state of Colorado, beginning in Denver, city and county of Denver. This is a photograph of a proceeding inside a juvenile court in Chicago, in Denver. Excuse me, not in Chicago, in Denver. These are some of the young people that they came before the court. Many of them were given sentences, light sentences, that helped them to avoid being put into an adult prison. However, the overwhelmingly vast majority of African American young people didn't have those kinds of protections, particularly in the South. And these are some young men, we don't know their exact ages, but put on a chain gang what we call the convict leasing system. You can see that they are chained together. They have axes and heavy equipment or heavy tools for heavy work. And prisoners were leased out to businesses at very low wages. In fact, the money technically wasn't a wage, it was paid back to the prison. So one of the ways the prison raised money was by arresting people sometimes on light charges, putting them in jail and putting them on a chain gang. And if you had to guess, which state in the United States today has more convict leasing, what would your guess be? Double check me on this or triple check me on this. But the correct answer, in my understanding, is the state with the largest number of convict leasing or prisoners is the state of California. Point 4, working women. Working women. Closely connected to the anti-child labor movement was the effort to limit the number of hours that women could work. A lot of people believe that it was inconsistent to protect a young girl or a woman until she was 16 and then let her work 78 hours a week. Or someone said to work from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m., 13 hours a day, 78 hours a week for $6. The group that led the fight to keep women from working excessive numbers of hours was Florence Kelley and the National Consumers League. They believed it was wrong to allow, quote, mothers of future generations, unquote, to work these long hours in dangerous dark factories. The most important court case in point B on women's work came before the United States Supreme Court in 1908, called Muller v. Oregon. This was the argument, or the brief, as we call it, for this case was written by a woman named Josephine Goldmark, who was a friend and a co-worker of Kelley at the National Consumers League. And she wrote the brief for Muller v. Oregon that her brother-in-law, Louis Brandeis, used when he argued the case. And as you may know, Louis Brandeis went on later himself to become a justice on the U.S. Supreme Court. The Supreme Court upheld this law in the state of Oregon that limited the working hours of women, not of men, but of women, because of the sociological argument that Goldmark made when she went into great detail about the disease and the dangers that women faced in these factories. Louis Brandeis, the arguing attorney, said that the government had a special interest to protect the health of its citizens. And so the state upheld this law, the Supreme Court upheld this law, and then many states began to pass protective legislation for women. And so the reformers were able to limit the working hours for women under these kinds of laws. There were many problems, however. First of all, the argument that was used was that women needed special protections because women were weaker than men. That was one problem, to use that kind of argument. Secondly, this law was used to discriminate against women and deny them jobs, because all the company had to say was, well, this is hard work and a woman can't do this work, so we're not going to hire her. We're going to hire only men. So a better approach would have been to protect or limit the working hours for everybody, not just women. But the reformers didn't quite see it that way. So it was a victory, but it was only a partial victory. In some cases, it wasn't a victory at all. Another very important concern for the progressives was their campaign for women's suffrage. Suffrage means the right to vote. So this means their campaign for women voting. A lot of the, of course, women could not vote in almost all American states. They could only vote in a few states and a few territories at this time. But the social justice reformers wanted all women to be able to vote. And there were a lot of arguments that were used, some of them using stereotypes. Jane Addams, for example, was very progressive, argued that urban women would not only vote intelligently, but they needed to vote to protect, clothe, and feed their families. And she said that women could be housekeepers of the city, just like they were housekeepers at home. And then the problem, of course, one problem with this push to get women's the right to vote was that in the South, this would have meant that Black women could vote when Black men had already been, for the most part, prevented from voting, having their voting rights denied. So this was highly controversial because the argument for women voting, because it would allow Black women to vote. And that, of course, would change political power in the South. So the progressive push that all women needed to vote did not really come to fruition or success until World War I, as we will see later. Another important issue was the question of birth control, which is, of course, highly controversial. A lot of progressives, even some of the more advanced progressives, found it somewhat uncomfortable to talk to women about how to use birth control, especially because there was a law called the Comstock Law, which was passed in 1873, that made it illegal to promote or even write about contraceptive devices. In this connection, many history texts and lecturers mention Margaret Sanger. Margaret Sanger was a nurse. She had watched a lot of women die during childbirth, from having too many children, perhaps. Some died from dangerous, illegal abortions. And Margaret Sanger is generally regarded as one of the modern founders, one of the founders of the American birth control movement. Middle-class Americans found different ways to limit family size, but there was a lot of ignorance and misinformation that circulated. So Margaret Sanger tried to get the latest medical and scientific evidence from Europe. And then in 1914, in her magazine called The Woman Rebel, and in a pamphlet called Family Limitation, she taught women that they could separate sexual activity from procreation or having children. She was arrested for violating the postal code, fled to Europe. And birth control remained very controversial, and in many states, even illegal for many years. Sanger tried to force this topic out into the open so people could talk about it. She returned to the United States in 1921. She founded the American Birth Control League, which became Planned Parenthood in 1942. There is a problem, however, because Margaret Sanger tended to believe that some ethnic groups were inferior to others. And for this reason, of late, she has become quite controversial. And many groups who favor birth control are now distancing themselves from Margaret Sanger. So there's some accomplishments many historians believe in what she did, but there's a growing controversy around some of her beliefs, particularly her beliefs in social Darwinism and other racist theories. This is a photograph of the this is from the um, campaign by Florence Kelly and the National Consumer League to prevent women from working. And this shows you beautiful clothing items made by children and women under terrible working conditions. Notice it says in the top, they're products of the tenement workshop. So Florence Kelly would take beautiful clothing and put it up, and then, but she would show that this was made by slave labor. I suspect one could do the same thing by going into just about every apparel store. You could go into H&M, I suppose, and if you wanted to, you could identify that many articles of clothing were made by slave labor. Given the low price of many articles, there's no other way to explain that price except the use of slave labor or child labor in those garment factories where that clothing is produced. Of course, people today, through the supply chain, are better able to hide who actually made it. But I don't believe that the situation today is all that different fundamentally than it was 100 years ago when it comes to labor and cheap clothing, inexpensive clothing, I should say. Margaret Sanger, and we talked about her. It's also important to take a look at the progressive effort to promote better houses and better schools and that campaign. The reformers, as we mentioned before, believed that better housing and better schools could transform for the better the lives of the poor and then create a better world. Now, in order to bring this issue to the attention of the public, historians and progressives at the time looked at a man named Jacob Riis, because Jacob Riis, now we live in a world today, of course, where there's pictures, there's stuff on the internet, and there's so much, there are videos and pictures of virtually everything imaginable. But at the time, photography really wasn't in widespread use yet, at least commercial use. And so Jacob Riis took photographs that are that today wouldn't seem that shocking if you consider the situation of the homeless in Los Angeles. But at the time, they were very shocking to people. And Riis, for example, in 1890, published a book called How the Other Half Lives. And those photographs horrified people. He used very strong language. He used these very haunting photographs. He showed overcrowded tenements, these dark alleys where people lived, the sickness and despair that affected people who lived in the slums of New York. And reformers had been trying for years to improve housing in that city and other large cities. They had constructed what we call model tenements and housing projects. They sent so-called friendly visitors to the residents to collect the rent, to try to teach them how to live like the middle class. Riis himself labored to replace New York's worst slums with parks and playgrounds. And to do this, Riis and the housing progressives applied patterns of reform that they had learned in the child labor fight. They applied those to housing problems. So in the first decade of the 20th century, then, the progressives tried this new approach to solving the housing problems. They got statistics, they went door to door in slums or tenements and got surveys, they organized committees, they constructed exhibits on the street to show the effects of overcrowding. And then they tried to pass house laws, tenement house laws. But of course, those laws were evaded or modified or changed and weakened. Some of them tried to pass federal laws and even started to talk about government subsidized housing, something we take for granted a little bit more today, but at the time was very novel and new. In addition to better houses, some progressives tried to make better schools. Chief among these individuals was John Dewey, who looked at education in a much more progressive way. Because next to housing, progressives believed that better schools would produce better citizens. And progressive education was sort of against all the rigid ideas that had come before, and they were in favor of trying new things, new approaches, new solutions to education. And John Dewey was the key philosopher of this movement called progressive education. And as you may recall from the reading, he grew up in Vermont. He tried throughout his life to recreate in the city sort of the small town life he'd experienced in Vermont. He worked at the University of Chicago and had a sort of a teaching laboratory where he tried out different methods and things like that. One of the things that he did, it may seem insignificant today, but he took those desks, the desks that the students sat in, that were bolted to the floor, and then unbolted them and then moved them around. So you could have small groups, you could have circles. So it sort of got rid of that rigid flexibility in the room. In fact, the seat that was unbolted came to be called the movable seat. And the movable seat was sort of the symbol of progressive education. Not only that, but Dewey began to popularize something we call child-centered education. That is, Dewey believed that schools should be child-centered, not subject-centered. So teachers should teach children instead of teaching history or math. Dewey didn't mean that you shouldn't teach math or history, but he believed that those subjects should be related to the experience of the children. So students then should learn by doing. So instead of studying how to construct a house, you should let the students actually build one. Instead of learning about democracy, the school should, and the classroom should operate like a democracy. The children have a voice or whatever. Dewey also believed, this is point 3, C3. Dewey also believed, and this is a little more controversial, he believed that schools should become instruments for social reform. That is to say, he believed that the purpose of schools was not just to teach children to read and write, but to teach them to become little progressives. And he wasn't sure. It seems like Dewey was maybe a bit confused, and I have respect for him, but it seemed like he was a little bit confused if whether he wanted to help students learn how to adapt to a world that was quickly changing, or he wanted to create students who would go out and change the world. But in general, this philosophy was very optimistic and hopeful, because schools, as one has written, schools could create more flexible, better educated, more understanding adults who then would go out to improve society. So schools were very important in this effort. A few photographs to show you. There's a picture of Dewey. Excuse me, Jacob, I beg your pardon, Jacob Riis, and his book, How the Other Half Lives. This is a picture of some young people living above a heating grate in the cold months of the year without even any shoes, staying warm by sleeping on a ventilator shaft. There's some business people walking down the street. Finding a man who's sick or sleeping in broad daylight, or at least the early hours of the evening, perhaps. This is a picture inside of a what's called a sweatshop, where clothing is manufactured in Midtown Manhattan somewhere. And you can see adults there, but the adults are using the young boy, I should say, to use the correct term, the young boy to make clothing. Here's some people living in an alleyway, several houses there. Not that surprising to those who live in a city like Los Angeles, who see people living on the streets all the time. There's a picture of some workers sleeping, well, we can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, at least 6 men in this crowded room, probably in a basement somewhere. Probably working 13 hours a day. Some of those men look like they have serious foot injuries already. The man in that upper bunk on the left seems to have a very seriously malformed foot, and I'm sure no medical care. Here's some Asian Americans living in a basement somewhere, maybe beneath a restaurant, getting some sleep after having worked at least a 13-hour day, 6 days a week. There's Dewey. Here's a picture of a school in South Boston with fixed desks. Everybody holding the book the same. A lot of emphasis on comportment and sitting properly, how to control oneself, and so on in the classroom with the bolted desks. Here's a picture of a progressive educational room, not only with flexible seating and the movable seats formed sort of a half circle, but a child actually at the board participating in the instruction. This is a progressive schoolroom. And lastly, point 6, the progressives also opposed greatly the sale of alcohol. Now, this is a little I'm not defending the progressives on this point, but simply trying to explain what they believed. Given that progressives, for the most part, were against alcohol, that seems somewhat unenlightened and maybe not like a progressive value. But you have to remember that the progressive believed that healthy, educated citizens could create a healthy, educated society. This is why they believed that the sale and consumption of alcohol was wrong, because it limited people's ability to reform the world. It clouded their mind. Now, a lot of these progressives, some of them came from Protestant conservative homes where consuming liquor was seen as morally wrong. But whether you were from a conservative religious background or you were not, progressives tended to unify on the question of alcohol. They believed that it limited a person's ability to think and reason correctly, especially if they're under the influence of wine and alcohol. Now, Americans historically have consumed a lot of alcohol. And as in the late 19th century, and even today, it still exists, there was something called the Women's Christian Temperance Union. And this was a movement dedicated to temperance, for getting people to drink little or no alcohol. The progressives sort of took over that movement from the WCTU. And the modern anti-liquor movement had been originally a very religiously based movement. But during the progressive era, these forces, the forces that were organized in the country to limit the sale and consumption of alcohol were very successful. A lot of states passed temperance laws between 1906 and 1912. Part of the object of the progressive dislike was the saloon, the bar. We say it's a lightning rod because this is where their anger and their opposition to drinking was directed. Reformers were very upset to see young children going into saloons or bars to bring home a pail of beer. They were horrified by stories of alcoholic fathers beating wives and children. So they focused their attention, their expose, if you will, against the bar. One reformer who was very upset at bars or saloons said this: "Why should the community have any more sympathy for the saloon than for a typhoid breeding pool of filthy water, a swarm of deadly mosquitoes, or a nest of rats infected with the bubonic plague?" The problem is that progressives, many of whom were from the middle class, many of whom did not drink themselves, did not understand that, to a point, the saloon had social importance in many immigrant communities. Some did. Jane Addams, of course, understood that. But in a lot of, for instance, in the German community, for instance, people would go to the saloon and that's where families would eat. They would have big meals and they would have some beer. They weren't there drinking beer to get drunk. It was just part of the social custom, maybe like wine is in Italy. A lot of Italians drink wine not to get drunk. It's just part of the meal. But the saloon was sort of I guess you could say, demonized and made to be the evil influence in society. Some of the progressives even tried to find substitutes for the saloon. They would create coffee houses, or a place where you could go and have non-alcoholic drinks and play games and things like that. But there was an enduring animus or dislike of alcohol. And many progressives and others continue to push for prohibition laws prohibiting the sale and consumption of alcohol. The efforts of progressives and some more conservative temperance workers led to victory on December the 22nd, 1917, when Congress sent to the states for ratification a constitutional amendment known as the 18th Amendment, which prohibited the sale, manufacture, and importation of intoxicating liquor within the United States. And at this time, people were sacrificing food and other essentials for World War I. So the temperance supporters said, well, we should conserve alcohol too. So the 18th Amendment was passed. And of course, later, as we know, it was removed. It was put into the Constitution of the United States, and then it was taken out of the Constitution later. Another object of concern for reformers were dance halls and movie theaters. In addition to saloons, many progressives saw the urban dance hall and the movie theater as moral threats to the well-being of young people, especially women. Now, the motion picture, which was invented in 1889, became, within a decade, within 10 years or so, an important form of entertainment. And at first, the so-called Nickelodeons, where you put a nickel in there, you could go in and watch a production, and these were directed mainly at lower class and largely ethnic audiences. For example, in 1902, New York City had 50 theaters. By 1908, there were over 400 theaters that were showing 30-minute dramas and romances. The problem is some of the subject matter in the films was, in the minds of some, questionable. It wasn't until World War I, in point G, that when D.W. Griffith, produced long feature films, that movies began to attract a middle-class audience. Sad to say, one of the most popular of those early films was D.W. Griffith's The Birth of a Nation, 1915, which argued that Black Reconstruction, a noble effort after the Civil War to reconstruct Southern society, D.W. Griffith's movie portrayed this, that Black Reconstruction, as harmful and a joke and destructive. So much so that the Ku Klux Klan had to come in and save the South from so-called Black rule, unquote. That film, of course, was based on a film called The Klansman, a novel called The Klansman. Much of it was filmed in the Los Angeles area. Some of it, we're told, not far from Culver City, where our college is located. Many early films were imported from France, from Italy, from Germany. And because they were silent films, you didn't need subtitles. And that's, of course, one of the attractions. But reformers objected not only to the plots and the contents of the films, but also to the fact that they were dark and they were in sort of entertainment districts. And there were a lot of stories written about what young people were doing there in those theaters, kissing and whatever else young people do in theaters. But the point of these was to try to demonize or to make movie theaters look bad, particularly for young people. And of course, when kids are very young, you have to, of course, watch what they see. And, concerned parents don't want their children to have free access to the internet on their phone, on their little phones or the phones that the little kids use and stuff. A lot of stuff that you see is definitely harmful. So there is, at certain ages, there's a legitimate concern, but a lot of these concerns were legitimate, but some were made to look worse than they really were. This is a dance hall, a photograph of a dance hall, Klondike Dance Hall, a saloon. And some of the women are having their picture taken in front of that. This is the inside of a saloon where people are playing a game. The problem in some people's minds started when large sums of money were gambled and led to illegal gambling, fights, and other problems inside these halls. These are two young girls outside of a beer hall, a saloon, who are, in some people's minds, too close to the action. Excuse me. This is an early movie theater. You can see all kinds of moving pictures being shown there. Some of them are just completely harmless. Others, it was argued, were not so harmless. So there's an effort to perhaps control some of these and cause problems for the theater owners. beg your pardon. To summarize, the progressive movement was an important time in our country's history because it was an attempt by reformers to remake, to reshape, and to make better a society that they thought, and most people thought, had been harmed by industrialization, urbanization, and immigration. And so the reformers, of course, were a varied group. They can't be really talked about as one coherent group because there were many different interests and different approaches, but they were optimistic. They believed in change, and in some cases, they were able to make substantial change, which of course is an encouragement to anyone today that's trying to promote social justice or any other kind of reform movement. There are lessons to be learned from the progressive movement that would help to make our own society more progressive in the time in which we live now. Thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any questions or comments or discussion, please feel free to share those with me, and look forward to discussing those with you. Thank you very much.